conquering unfamiliar waters and cultivating expansion.
My name is Nikita, CEO, founder of Mancala Gaming. So I guess we're going to be discussing a bit about the innovations, the challenges within the online gambling market in Asia. So with that said, I guess...
I'm Darryl Manning, CEO of 𝐂𝐭𝐡. I came up through gaming in Australia, so I have very much a land-based background. Went through social gaming, and now we're doing our own online gaming and ready to jump into the Asian market. That is our main focus at the moment.
Thank you very much. My name is Erik. Unlike these two gentlemen who are game providers, I am the operator on stage. We all thought we were going to have a moderator, but I guess we'll wing it. So my operating business is facing Japan. Hence, that's where my expertise lies on this panel.
One of the things we were really going to focus on today was regulations in the Asian market. Now, I know there's a big. That's a sort of a funny question because we're traditionally known for not being regulated, but as you saw from the previous panel, we have entities that are trying to change that. Personally, I think we need to be regulated because human nature, okay? But I don't think that the regulators are always acting on the players' benefit. So I think they need to be very smart about what they do and how they implement those regulations. Erik?
Yeah, on that topic, might as well. So Japan right now is a very tough market. It's obviously not a regulated market. And our operations today only include casino, but because the fact that the Japanese government are actually discussing a regulation for sports betting, it kind of makes us curious to venture that space. But if you don't know Japan, I can tell you that everything that takes 2 years in any other area takes 6 years in Japan. So if they start discussing it now, it might happen, who knows, in 10 years. But the positive thing is that there is a sort of a movement looking at what other markets are doing. So the Japanese have sent government official or key people to other markets to explore how other countries regulate their markets. And to me, it's a great first step.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think coming from mostly the European markets, it is a challenge for us as a provider, for example, to understand how the various Asian countries function. So I think if there is a regulation involved, at least you get a perception of how you should be particularly attacking these markets. At the current in the current frame of things, there is really no real way of doing it unless you are actually going into the market with somebody who is local and somebody who understands what is going on within that particular country. I think it's also very important to understand that Asia isn't one country; it's it's an area. So there are multitudes of specifics when it comes to each country and the preferences that players and operators will have within that specific country. Say, for example, Japan.
And particular challenges that we have facing going into Asia is the changing landscape of the regulatory market. So at the moment it's fairly basic. So what we are doing is we're learning from the various regulations in Europe to work out how we can prepare ourselves when we're going into Asia, particularly if markets are now having brand new regulations and untold variations on their regulations. So what we are doing specifically is to build in options. We know what the limitations are in Europe, so we want to build in those options to be configurable and future-proof our games for when the regulations do come in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should talk about something else. We were given a few questions prior to this, thinking that there was someone moderating it, but I think one question that we were given was obviously particular challenges if you're brand new to the Asian market. And I started thinking, to give you an example, because our first company was a big casino in Germany that we initially just translated to Japanese. And we learned very quickly that was never going to fly, because Japan, for example, it's such a different market. So we sort of exited and then started from scratch, did surveys in Japan to really localize the product. Customer support is incredibly important, but also what you see on the site in terms of content and characters, all these things that we didn't really have in Germany. So that was a great learning curve, and I'm sure you guys, when it comes to your games, are also trying to adjust to the different markets.
Yeah, Eric, absolutely. And I think Darryl here will agree with me that it's not just localization is a very big term here. We have to not only just simply translate the game or the title. I think as a game provider yourself, you will agree that you have to create a game for that market by that market. You're not going to hire a European artist to draw a Japanese game because that will never work. You have to find someone who's Japanese to do your work, to create the game, to create the mechanic, to approach that market. Otherwise, you are just dead in the water.
I remember a company I used to work for designed an Australian-themed game. And us, as Australians, look at it in disgust. We go, that's not even nearly close. It's so offensive. It is so wrong. The art style was way off target. And then I think about that, like if we are designing games for Southeast Asia or for Japan, what lessons can I learn from that? We have to be mindful of the cultural sensitivities in those markets, and we have to get the product right. So that's where we are focused.
Yeah, there's so many examples. There was one operator, they thought they nailed the anime character for Japan. They were like, oh, this is the best looking anime ever in Japan. It was not designed by a Japanese, and to a Japanese eye, it just looked so wrong. and I don't think they exist anymore.
Actually, as you reminded me of another story where we designed a Japanese ninja game, and we showed the owner of the company, who was Japanese, and he shakes his head and goes, no, they're Korean eyes. And we had no idea.
I think that, if we're talking about hurdles and potential issues that you would face trying to enter any of the Asian countries, I think one very important aspect, and this comes from a provider myself, is the speed. This is something that we usually don't even think about when we're talking about Europe or LATAM or even Africa. One thing here is certain is that the players expect to play very quickly. They want the latency to be almost zero. It has to be absolutely pitch perfect. And when it comes to the spins of the game, the player wants to be able to click, 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 and get the results instantaneously. So as a provider yourself, if you don't have your infrastructure, your cluster set up in a way that allows the player to have this smooth, easy experience, as soon as they enter the game, they see that it's slow, they will leave and they won't come back. So I think that's another thing that, maybe a lot of game providers who are coming in from other countries into this market are not even considering, or perhaps should think about when they are going to come.
As you say, the speed, and we design for ourselves. Well, we design the game the way we want it to play. One of them is that ability to go as fast as you can. One of them is the means on a, let's say, regulatory requirement to slow that spin to a certain pace. And we need that flexibility as well. So I was going back to the configurability of the game. We need to address the fastest players, and we need to address maybe the slowest regulators as well.
Do you remember any of the other questions that we were supposed to discuss?
I think that was about as much as I can remember.
But, actually, one thing I did want to talk about in terms of challenges in the Southeast Asian market is technology and how that affects how we design games and how we present and deliver games as well. So, for example, when we were designing 5 years ago, if we had a delivery that was bigger than 15 megabytes, it was considered a no-go. That 15 megabytes too heavy. But with a changing technology now, 15 megabytes seems light. But it's also the games themselves are evolving to match that technology. So where 5 years ago it was a very 3x5 slot and very basic play, now we're getting the likes of megaways and far more complex games that are now more adapted to the technology as well.
Actually, that's a very interesting point that you've made, and this is something that I think the Asian market, takes with the African market, because they are also in requirement to have the size of the games as slow as possible. And if we're talking about technology, thank God to WebP that has been recently introduced that allows you basically to maintain the quality of the images, but at the same time lower down by 5-10%, times the weight of the games. So games that were used to be 15, 20 megabytes, you drop those down to 3, 4, or 5. And I think that's something when it comes to technology. I think the adaptation of that into our market is something that we should maybe pay attention more so. When these new innovative ideas come out, something that we should perhaps discuss more and try to integrate more into the product that we are releasing ourselves.
The other thing is tailoring the games to their individual markets. As you said, Nikita, there are a lot of different markets in Southeast Asia, and do you just put one culture into your game, or would you? It would be a question to you. Would you take a game, a math model, for example, and reskin it for 3 or 4 different Southeast Asian countries, and release it like that?
It really depends, but I would probably not do that. No. I think that at the end of the day, from a perspective of a provider, it really is to understand what the value would be from doing that. So if you're doing a reskin, that's obviously something that's going to be very cost efficient, right? But then again, you are probably losing a large chunk of the player base from either of those countries that you're doing it for, because you're not targeting their specific needs. And I believe that if you really want to approach this in a more professional and honestly a better way, you would look at the player needs, you would look at what the market is telling you from, let's say, competition, and then you try to adapt for that, rather than taking some product that perhaps is working in one country and then reskinning it for the next, just because, let's say, they like flowers and over there they like bells. So that's my perspective on this.
Derek, I've got a question for you. In terms of, you're in the Japanese market, what do you look for in a game as a provider, as an operator?
Well, I think all of us operators have been looking for a pachinko-like game that really, an experienced pachinko player feels this is super genuine, the closest you can get to an online pachinko machine. And there have been a lot of game providers that have tried to make it a pachinko look and feel game. Some are more successful than others. Right now, there is one provider that I know work exclusively with one of our competitors, unfortunately, but they seem to have really nailed that product that I know have gained traction. So that would be the easy answer. But then also, in Japan, everybody loves live casino or live baccarat and those type of games. So, Evolution have had a lot of power and they're still great, but there are other brands coming up that are, closing the gap, so to speak.
Erik, if I may follow that, actually, as an operator yourself working within Japan, I'm pretty sure you see a lot of providers coming in and offering various products. What is the most common mistake that you see them make, and what is the best thing that you have seen them do?
Great question. My job is unfortunately not too much with the games themselves. I'm a marketeer, but I meet a lot of game providers who. It's a good question. I would say, I get access to a lot of demo products, and I play them. I'm not the best judge to determine if they're going to work or not. But if there is an easy way for us to test the games, and talking about our company, it helps if you're integrated to one of our aggregators, because then we can easily test the game. So if you're a new game provider, I would assume it's good to really sign up with the bigger aggregators that are big in Asia in this case.
Thank you, thank you.
One of the challenges we have is that the Asian market is dominated by a couple of big players. So how do we compete with that? Do we compete with them in terms of revenue share or GGR? Do we try and compete with them, or do we try to compete with product, or do we present ourselves as something distinct from them and an addition rather than their competition? I mean, that's what we are struggling with at the moment.
And I think that, when it comes to competition and trying to get a margin within the market share, we have to go back and think, okay, what difference are we bringing to the table, as you mentioned? What is our competitive advantage here, and how can we use that competitive advantage to take a piece of the pie? So at the end of the day, we're talking about slots. Slots are slots, right? So what is it that's special about that product that is going to attract those players who are already playing your PG softs, your pragmatic and whatnot? What is going to attract them to go into your product and actually stick and play and enjoy it? And again, as we mentioned before, there are many things that we have to consider. We have to consider the latency. We have to consider the specifics of the player's request in terms of the visuals, the mechanics, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things, that you have to take into consideration on top of doing something different.
I agree. One of our main focuses is to focus on building trust with the player. How do you build their trust, and how do you keep their trust? And it comes down to functionality of the game itself, the software, how the games are presented, how they play. As you said, the latency, keeping them engaged as well. So all of these are considerations for us, and that we actually focus on deeply to try and get it right.
Absolutely, and I think, Erik, I'm pretty sure you have a very good insight of trying to maintain those players, to keep those players engaged, to stay obviously within your casino. What are the hurdles that you face as an operator to keeping the Asian player within your specific space rather than going to competition?
Okay, so I'll give you one example. We actually, as I said, we work with aggregators, but we did one direct integration with a new Japanese game provider. Because we really believe in their demo product and their ideas and everything. What happened was we essentially educated them in a lot of stuff, both tech-wise, educating them a lot about how they should, move on next. We got the integration done. We still believe that there's huge potential in this game. But now they are busy with our competitors. We feel a little bit, maybe we shouldn't have educated them that well. But in the same sense, they're great guys. We're happy that we did the integration. And for us, it was a learning curve to do our first integration outside the aggregators. That could be a smart approach if your games are good enough to go exclusively with someone, because then they're forced to sort of promote the games. And if it's a good game, all the others are going to come. I don't know if that answers your questions, but it came to my mind.
My question would be as well, like, to understand or to see, to kind of how your approaches for the player engagement within your casino changes based on their preferences. So let's say you have a player, right? Your goal is to retain, your goal is to keep them engaged and playing as long as possible with your casino. So what are the challenges that you see and face within the Asian market to keep that player engaged?
I don't think it differs. For us, it doesn't differ that much what we do in terms of Germany versus Japan. It's about looking at, okay, these players, they prefer these games, incentivize them by giving them bonus to maintain their favorite games. Most players, they play one or two or even more games, but it's pretty clear. You can see what games they like, and then a good retention team will sort of adjust the bonuses to maintain the player staying with your casino.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Another topic I want to talk about is, I mentioned that there are 2 or 3 main players that we are all competing against to be seen by operators and by the players as well. But in addition, you've got 100+ games coming out every single week that are absolutely flooding the market, from smallest operators to the biggest operators. So for us, that's a huge challenge as well. How do we get seen? How can we market ourselves to rise above that 100+ games that are coming out every week?
Yeah, definitely is a very big issue. I think not just in Asia, I think overall within our industry, the oversaturation of the market is there, it's present. And then the goal, I believe, is and everybody, I think every provider wants to do this, is to create that one-hit game. That new mechanic that is going to just roll over and start to control the industry, start to control the market. We've seen that with Megaways, we've seen that with Crash Games, but there has been a bit of an, I would say a few years now that we haven't really seen anything or anybody come up with something that is truly revolutionary and something that is really similar to what Megaways were, back in the day. So right now, I think we're just, very close to seeing somebody come up with that new mechanic, that new style of game that will be really interesting to the player, and of course will be a big hit. Now, as a provider myself, we're all trying to do that. We're all coming up with all these. I'm sure you have, your studio, your game producers coming up with these crazy new innovative ideas. You release them and then hope for the best.
Yeah, but it's also being seen. So how you might have the greatest or the most unique game in the world. That could be the next big thing. How do you get it out there? So, for example, we would look at our experienced CCO to drive the traffic and to build the relationships with aggregators, with operators throughout Southeast Asia. That's our main strategy, but then we want to also work with streamers to actually be seen and for people to sit up and take notice, and even for operators to want to come to us and go, I've seen your game, I want it. That would be ideal for us. That's our target.
That would be a perfect world, wouldn't it? For all the operators just to come over and ask, hey, that's the product we want.
Yes, yeah. Have you ever seen a product like that's driven you, that says, I don't know who these guys are, but I want it?
Speaking for my colleague who is a really good head of product and she's very casino savvy, she has. Yeah, it happens. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, I know she is bombarded with game providers trying to show her how great their games are. So it's part of her job to navigate through that. But
so how many games would she see a week?
So I know I don't know how many she sees, but I know we add 5 to 6 games every day.
Yeah.
So if you do the math, that's a lot of games. So it's hard to stand out.
So that's just navigating and then deciding on 5 games a day.
Correct.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. That's, yeah, I've got it. We've still got 6 minutes, but we're exhausted. We should have had our chat set up over there because we spoke for half an hour before we got here. But does anyone have any questions, any specific questions for any of us? Yes.
Is there a microphone?
Hi, hello. What about the lacking bridge between providers and affiliates? Because a lot of the dependencies on the operators to market and to push.
Yeah, sorry, can you...
What about the lack of the bridge between the affiliates and the providers? So you say that it's to build trust, right?
Yeah.
And leverage to an extent the traffic that's also brought into by the operators. Rather than going through streamers, why don't you go through affiliate companies in the same way that operators are going to get traffic from affiliate companies? Yeah. And this applies to both sides. I don't want to cut out the middleman, but...
Yeah. Do you include streamers as affiliates? Yeah, I think streamers are significant. They have been for a couple of years now and really drive traffic. Absolutely. I think if you're not looking to work with affiliates, then you're lacking. I don't think you can succeed, can you?
I don't know. I think that over the last year or maybe more so, I think providers as ourselves have started to incorporate affiliates within our marketing strategy and our strategy of sales as well. I wholeheartedly believe that marketing and sales work together. They should. And for many years, affiliates have been associated as part of marketing rather than the other way around. So I think that you make a very good point here that this should be more often, and I think that affiliates and affiliations should be working more closely as well with providers since they already have access to the operator and have direct talks with him, and they're already working on getting players there. So I think it's a bridge and a gap that should be filled quicker rather than what we have these days.
Yeah, as you say, it should be a central core of your marketing campaign. Yeah, I agree. Do you have any associates?
Well, yeah, from an operator perspective, specifically about Japan, streamers were extremely good partners a couple of years ago, but then they arrested streamers. There's a big thing going on in Japan right now. There was a big streamer who got arrested. His sentence came 3 weeks ago, and he was the first one in Japan ever to be charged with habitual gambling, which is a more serious offense compared to simple gambling that a few people have been sentenced with before. But yeah, so right now a lot of streamers targeting Japan, they're either leaving Japan or closing the business, unfortunately for us.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question? All right, gentlemen, I think that would be it for our end. Thank you all for listening. Thank you guys as well for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nikita, Darryl, and Erik, for this fireside chat.